everyone, welcome to episode 144 of A Stitch in Time. Today is Saturday, June 13th, 2020. I'm Carol, also known as Knitsnpurls on Ravelry, and I live in the Fraser Valley of British Columbia, not too far east of Vancouver. If this is your first time watching, hello, welcome. Thank you for checking out the podcast, and if you're a returning viewer, welcome back. Hello again. Thank you for coming by once again to spend part of your day with me. A very huge thank you to the many of you who reached out this past week via private message and comments. I was overwhelmed by how many of you took the time to drop me a line and say hello, and I just want you to know how much I appreciate this interaction I have with so many of you. Yes, it's Saturday. So much for recording early in the week, like Tuesday and Wednesday. Truth be told, I have rediscovered an old hobby this week, and I just didn't really feel like recording. I just wanted to craft away. Also, I took advantage of decent weather on Wednesday to spend the morning in the garden because it desperately needed some attention. We have had a fair bit of rain lately, which makes it hard to get much done out there. Have an overcast day. It's a bit blustery out there, and we're expecting some rain later on again. So I think by late next week, the sun's supposed to shine. So cross fingers for that. As a matter of fact, I did record yesterday, and if you're a podcaster, you'll understand better than non-podcasters that sometimes when you sit down to record, your words just flow, everything comes together, it's almost effortless. And other times you record and re-record and re-record various segments, and it never feels like it comes together in a cohesive way. And despite recording a full episode yesterday, putting it all together, going through the process of getting it ready for upload, I just wasn't happy with the episode and decided to scrap it and start all over again today. For one thing, it was much too long, so I'm going to try and not ramble on quite as much about certain things today. It also feels a little strange. It is Saturday. My husband is home, but he's in the kitchen working on his weekly report. So I decided he probably can't hear what I'm saying anyway. He's concentrating on what he's doing. So it does feel a little weird to have somebody else in the house while I'm recording, because I am not used to that at all. I am still having issues with getting notifications about comments on YouTube. I think I had like 2 this week out of all the many comments I'd received. So, and it occurred to me that you might be in the same boat. If I reply to you, you may not see that I have. And one person in particular I wanted to reach out to, in case she's watching this week, is Jan, who asked me a question about how I knit a heel flap and gusset sock and manage not to get holes where the at the corner of the gusset. I had a little prop here yesterday and it's over there now. And Jan, I've left you a link on my reply to a video tutorial I did on this subject way back when I first started podcasting about 3.5 years ago. And I will put that same link into the show notes for this week in case any of you are also interested in how I personally knit a top-down traditional heel flap and gusset. Another thing I wanted to mention before I get into the meat of the podcast is yesterday morning I came across, I had a YouTube video pop up on my feed, and it addressed the issue of what to do if you find that your glasses fog up when you wear a mask. So if you're like me and wear glasses most of the time, you may find that that's exactly what happens. You put your mask on and then your glasses fog up when you start talking especially. And so there's a YouTube channel for Jan Howell, different Jan than I was just talking about before. But actually her husband demonstrates how he takes a Kleenex or a piece of toilet paper and folds it in a specific way, lays it inside his mask like that before he puts it on. And he explains that not only does that layer of Kleenex help to create a further barrier between your face and the mask, kind of a little bit of filling, if you will, the paper tissue also helps to absorb some of the moisture that is expressed when you are talking and breathing. So I gave this a really quick try, and it does seem to help. So I thought those of you who might be struggling with this issue, as more and more of us are wearing masks more often, I thought I'd bring that to your attention. So I'll put the link to that also in the show notes. The only downside I see is that if you are taking your mask on and off frequently, this could become, an issue because it's just literally just sitting there. But if you're putting it on for, a specific period of time, you're going to have it on for a little bit, then I do think it's worth trying out. Because definitely having your glasses fog up is one of the downsides of wearing a mask. Okay, so before I get into my newfound old craft, I will talk about some knitting. So I have worked on 3 projects this week pretty well, and the first is my socks from this beautiful sock blank from Isis Fiber Arts. Oops. Doesn't have a colorway name, but I am calling them my sunny day socks because of the bright sunny yellow and bright blue in the colorway. So it is a figuring weight sparkly base. And yesterday when I showed it, I was only halfway down the foot, and I've done some work since then. So I am just about ready for the toe now. So this is a top-down sock, 64 stitches, got a twisted 1x1 rib, a yarn over short row heel, and just plain old stockinette. I am happy with my choice of heel. I think last week I had just finished the heel, and I talked about how I wanted to avoid sort of interrupting the way that the yarn was kind of pooling throughout the cuff, and it did indeed sort of continue to do the same sort of semi-striping on the foot. So I like how that heel just kind of blends in really well there. So continue to enjoy working on these. I really do think sock blanks are like super fun once you get used to working with the really curly yarn, because it does take a little bit of getting used to. They are fun to knit up and see how this translates to that. Another pair of plain stockinette socks are the ones I am knitting from this yarn from Fiber Nymph Dye Works. This is a self-striping in her bounce base in the chambray colorway. That's a label. And I think, pardon me, last time I talked about this, I was on the leg. I'm knitting 2 at a time concurrently on separate needles. And at that time I was somewhat down the leg, and I said I wasn't sure what kind of heel I was going to put in. I wanted to do a complementary heel out of some yarn that I had bought as a set with this one, a semi-solid called Denim. And it is not exactly the same as this blue in the chambray colorway, but it's very close. And I believe I said I wasn't sure what kind of heel I was going to do. It would depend on where this blue stripe ended up. And as it was, it turned out to be in a really ideal place for me to basically insert the heel midway through the stripe. I always think that's a really nice look on a self-striping sock if you're going to do a matching heel. I like to sort of divide the stripe that's at the instep, whether it be the same color or sometimes a contrasting color. I just think it looks nice like that. So what I do is I work my way down, I knit halfway through this blue stripe, did the short row heel, and then just carried on with the blue colorway. And I like that. You can see that a little bit better. So I like how that turned out. And even though the blues are slightly different, it's not, you know, boom, in your face different. So I think this sock I have finished to the end of this gray stripe. And with this one, I'm about maybe midway through that same color. So they're more or less in the same place. Obviously, I have to work my way down the foot. I actually worked on these in the car last weekend. I, for the first time in several months, ventured further than 5 minutes away from home. So that was very exciting. I'll talk about that a little later. Yeah, I've been sticking pretty close to home, as you know, and as many of you have been also. So it was kind of neat to just go a little further afield. So the third project and final knitting project I've been working on this week is Walk Along by Anka Strick. I am knitting mine from Madeline Tosh Merino Light. The main color is Night Bloom and the contrast is Onyx. And I've got quite a bit done. I am now completely finished the main body, and I'm now working on the part at the bottom that kind of makes it look like it's a, you know, has a layered look. Looks like you've got one top on over another. Now, I did have this on 2 needles, but I tried it on to get the right length for this main part. And so I'm quite happy with the length there. I'm really happy with the fit, and I like the A-line shape. It doesn't feel too big. It doesn't feel like it adds a lot of, you know, weight or anything to me. I feel like it's if not flattering, not unflattering, if you know what I mean. So what the pattern calls for is for you to do the ribbing at the bottom and then cast off and then pick up with your contrasting color like 1 stitch above the ribbing, about 1 stitch above the cast on. So the idea is that it looks like this portion is separate from your main body and that it's coming out from beneath your top. So I decided rather than pick up right along the edge of the ribbing, I thought, why not take that illusion sort of 1 step further and instead pick up at the top of the ribbing so that you had your ribbing kind of free, and it would give an even greater illusion that this top was being worn separately underneath. And I wasn't sure if that was going to work because as I've been knitting it, this ribbing keeps wanting to flip up. But I once I'd sort of gone a little ways past the ribbing with this black, I slipped the knitting back onto 2 needles and tried it on, and this does lie flat when it's on. So I'm quite happy with my decision to do that. I just think it, again, just adds that more of an illusion to it. So as you can see, I'm getting quite far down this way. I think I have about another, I think, half inch or so, and then the ribbing. So I'm very close to finishing the main body of this sweater. And then I just have the sleeves, which are very short, and then you add the same black contrast on the bottom, and you knit just a stockinette stitch and rolled edge the way it's done around the neckline. So yeah, very close to finishing this sweater, and cross fingers that it's done by next time I record, because I certainly, if I set my mind to it, I definitely could get that done by then. It's not an unreasonable goal. I really am very happy with that sweater. I love the way it fits, especially up here. It's probably the best fitting raglan fingering weight sweater that I have ever knit, and I can see myself using that as a sort of a base for future sweaters. And maybe I would do a different neckline without that little rolled thing, or maybe do long sleeves, which the pattern does include instructions for, and maybe do traditional, waist shaping instead of an A line for the body. But certainly the numbers for up in this area seem just right for my size. The way I've knit it just seems to fit really well. So I can definitely see this as a sweater I will refer to in the future as a basis for other sweaters, as far as deciding how I want them to fit. And I might sub in that particular raglan shaping, with the body of a different sweater in the future, just to make it all work to fit really well. So the craft that has really held my interest this week is cross stitch. Now, I used to be a very avid cross stitcher. I learned to cross stitch about 35 years ago when my daughter was young. My older sister taught me how, and I was quite into it for many, many years. But I have found in recent years, well, not only have I did knitting sort of overtake my attention as far as crafting goes, but also I was finding it more and more difficult to see. As I've gotten older, my eyesight has changed. And especially prior to last fall, when I got new glasses, I was finding it really difficult to see. And my eyesight is in such a way that if I take my glasses off, right here is perfectly clear, but I move any further, or even this way, like I just can't see properly. So if I have to read like a fine print on a pill bottle, I take my glasses off and I can read it here. The problem with trying to cross stitch with your fabric here is that your pattern is over here, and it's really hard to work back and forth. I would slip my glasses back on to see the pattern, or I'd hold it up here, put it down, stitch over here. I was just finding it really cumbersome to do it that way. And so I just let it go. So I got new glasses last fall with a stronger up-close prescription, and I've had it in the back of my mind since then, wondering if it would improve my vision well enough that I could cross stitch again. But I haven't really looked into it until now. And the last couple of weeks, I've just had a real itching to cross stitch one project in particular, which I will get to. Late last week, I hauled out my box of cross stitch, and I have a number of works in progress and future projects there too. And I decided before I started a new project, I should probably look at finishing up an old one. So I pulled out this. This is a Dimensions kit 3759 called Springtime Victorian. And I've probably had this on the go for like 20 years. And it was my plan to, I really love Victorian style homes, and it was my plan to cross stitch one representing every season and to change them out seasonally. So I do have a winter one that I have finished, and I do put it up around Christmas time every year. But I do have a summer one that is actually hanging in the closet over there. It's been finished for years. It's ready to frame. I've just never framed it. So this was the spring one. And I'm not quite sure why I let it linger so long, but I realized when I pulled it out, all I had was this area in here that required a couple of different colors, and then I needed to do the back stitch. And then I did have, you know, you always go over it and you might have missed stitches here and there, so I filled those in. So anyway, when between the time that I pulled it out and then working on it off and on over a matter of days, I finished this finally. So I have since washed it and laid it out to dry. So there it is. I'll bring it up closer so you can maybe get a better, whoops, not that close, or you won't be able to see it. So you can see it has an oval shape to it, and I will get it framed with an oval mat. It's a couple of places. When I pulled it out, the needle was in there and had rusted, and also there's some rust spots at the very bottom too, where I had put a needle at some point, but thankfully they are out of the framing area. So yeah, very, very pleased to have finally, after all these years, finished that, and kind of kicking myself it took so long. Now for those of you who cross stitch, this is 16 count Aida cloth, and I'm able to see it just fine from a regular distance with my new prescription. So that thrills me to death. What was I going to say? So for those who don't cross stitch, 16 count means there's 16 squares to the inch. So similar to gauge, right? So I'm just gonna go put this here, go to frame for a minute. Once I had finished that picture, I decided rather than begin a new project right away, I would do some work on another work in progress. It's this autumn bell pull. It is part of a series of seasonal bell pulls that had been published in Stony Creek magazine back in 2006. And I had bought everything I needed to complete all of them. Any special threads they called for, the fabrics, they all feature an interesting hardware for hanging them. And I had begun the autumn one, and I had gotten as far as the very top square, and I had then completed the U, and I had just begun the T, and then I stopped. And I know exactly what happened is I had this bright idea of, why don't I stitch all the letters first and then fill in all the fun part after? Well, I know what happened is once I had worked my way down to T, it was boring, and so I put it away. Also, I do remember having trouble working on this as far as seeing it properly too. So this is done on 18 count and cloth. And cloth is this fabric that has these, you know, these lines that run through it. Sometimes it's used for blankets. And so it's 18 count. You work over one thread, for those of you who are, again, familiar with cross-stitching. And once again, I am able to just hold this at a regular distance and be able to read the chart and, you know, see the squares on the fabric. And so I've been really enjoying working away on that. This particular square square features, see if I can bring it up close, a series of leaves and acorns. And so, yes, it's just been a pleasure to work on this one too. And at some point, I am hoping that I will have one for each season, because it's a neat idea, I think. There's winter, spring, whoops. See, and that's got a really pretty hanger to it. And then summer, it's a little bit harder to see, I think. So, yeah, enjoying working on those, and would hate to see all, like, as I said, I have all the things to complete them. I hate to see it never get done. But the thing I really, 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 really wanted to start is this picture by Lavender and Lace. It's number 24. It's called Oh Christmas Tree. And one thing that had been holding me back is that it is stitched over 2 threads of 32 count linen. So if you imagine that 16 count cloth has 16 little squares to the inch, 32 has 32 to the inch. But you stitch it over 2 threads, which means you end up with 16 stitches per inch, similar to the first one that I showed you. But that is a lot harder to see than 16 count Aida cloth. And I actually at first considered forgetting about the linen and just ordering a 16 count Aida cloth that would be in a similar color to what I had chosen for the background. And then I started looking online, and not only was it very expensive to have it shipped, I didn't find anything just right, and I really wanted to be able to see it in person to know that I had the color I really wanted. So then I thought, well, you know what? Why don't you just start it on the linen, see how it goes? Maybe you can do this. So that's what I did. I got it all up on a frame. As you can see, I've had some success. So I got my linen all prepped, and I always zigzag all the raw edges, and then I baste it onto the rollers. For like it comes with twill tape on these rollers. Then you turn them to make your fabric as taut as you can. You adjust it as you go, and then as you work in one part of the project, you can loosen the little screws here, roll it up, and roll up from the bottom. So most cross stitch, you find the center of the picture, and then you start working out from there. But I decided that since this very obviously had a top to it, I just made sure I had the right amount of fabric allowance on all sides of the picture, found the center, and then I just started from there, and I'm working my way down. So my plan is, well, my original plan was, let's pick the first color of green, first shade of green that starts right at the top of the tree, and let's cross stitch the whole tree in that color, and then let's get the next shade of green and cross stitch the whole tree with that one, and then let's pick the next color and go through the whole tree and do it. And then I realized that I would run into the very same problem as I did on my bell pull, is it would be so boring I would not work on it. So what I've decided instead is to sort of work in sections, and you can see I've sort of been working on this section of the tree. So I've done all the green in the various shades, and now I'm adding the ornaments and the candles, things like that. The only thing I'm going to do is wait until the end to do all the metallic thread. This whole border here is metallic thread. There's some lines up here, the star. And then there's beads. I'm going to wait and do all the beads afterwards too. But I'm going to do the whole tree, and then I'll work on the children, and then I'll add in all the metallic areas and bead areas. Now, what I am finding with this one, it is a lot harder to see the appropriate holes on the linen fabric just with my glasses. So I am finding it easier to take my glasses off and hold this closer. But what I'm finding is that I'm able to tuck the chart up kind of in the frame itself and be able to then refer back and forth from the chart to the stitchery, at the same eye level. And so far that seems to be working fine. I also think that as more and more of the stitches get filled in, the places where there are blank stitches become much easier to see, and that is something I could definitely stitch into, like an empty area with just my glasses. I would be able to see it well enough to do that. So anyway, I'm off to a good start. Now, I am well aware from personal experience that not only does cross stitch take a long time, but I am unlikely to remain faithful to these projects from start to finish for, long periods of time. So chances are these are things that will get worked on in spurts over the next who knows how many years. Once again, I have all the beads and threads and such to complete this picture, and I've had them since I worked at my local yarn and needlework shop, where I think I left there in 2007 or 8. So I've had this ready to go for a long time now. So I'm under no illusions that these will be done anytime soon. And I also know it's not that exciting for viewers to see like that much cross stitch done every week. So what I'll do is when I reach sort of significant steps along the way, for instance, finishing off the U square of the bell pull, then I'll share it with you. But it won't become a regular weekly feature unless I put a lot of work into it in a particular week. It still will, I suspect, primarily be a knitting podcast, because that really is at this stage of my life where my bulk of my crafting time is dedicated. So for the first time in quite a number of months, I actually have some acquisitions to share with you. I had 2 very special deliveries arrive at my door yesterday. So I am going to kind of put some of these things away and make way for my yarn purchases and show those to you momentarily. So hang on, I'll be right back. So it all started out innocently enough, as these things tend to do. I was going through my stash looking for possible yarn combinations for the upcoming Stillness Shawl Mystery Knit Along that begins June 25th. I talked about it last week. It is a mystery cal being hosted by Helen Stewart. And while we don't know what shape of shawl, we do know that we need 3 colors of fingering weight yarn, and we've since learned that the theme is still life. So I've been messaging with a Ravelry friend, and she suggested that someone might, pick a still life painting picture and then choose yarns or you choose colors from that picture and interpret it with your yarn. So I thought that was kind of a neat idea, and I did Google really quickly, took a really quick peek at some still life images. Honestly, still life is not really my go-to form of art, but I thought, I'll have to go back and take a closer look, but I just had it. So on Wednesday, I happened to be sitting in my bathroom, of all places, and my eyes fell upon this picture, which is definitely a still life. It's just not your traditional, picture and bowl full of apples or something. my bathroom is decorated with prints from this book by Nicole Robertson. I was introduced to her photography through a yarn club from Simply Socks Yarn Company a number of years ago. And we received 4 postcards in 3 different colors and skeins of yarn to match. And so I liked them so much that I had purchased this book and then went on to buy postcards in I think 4 more colors. And I have them framed in sets of 4 up on my bathroom wall, and then I chose washcloths and towels and such to match in all the different colors. So while this particular picture is not in this book, I thought it, as a standalone picture, sort of picked up some of those same colors. And I just love it. I've always loved this picture. So I knew I had a green about that shade. I knew I had orange. I knew I had pink yarn. So I went looking and pulled out these 3 skeins from Sweet Georgia Yarns. So there's this Tough Love sock here. This is a MCN merino cashmere nylon blend, and then this is another Tough Love sock. So that's a lot of color all together. So it got me thinking about, what if I could find a speckled yarn or something to complement either 2 of these colors. And so I went looking on the Sweet Georgia website because I knew that they had some yarns that might fit that bill. And I found this rainbow sprinkles. So you can see it's a kind of a neutral background, and then it has little pops of color. There's pink, there's green color, a little bit of brown. There isn't any orange, unfortunately, but what I thought is that this skein kind of picked up all the other colors in that picture, this kind of brown and beige and the purpley, anyway, and the white. So I thought that you could either put these 3 together, even though there isn't any orange in here, or these 3 together. I'm actually leaning towards the orange because I really like that green and orange together, and then there is pink in this one. So that's where I am leaning for my yarn choices for the mystery knit along. While I was on the Sweet Georgia website, I also came across, they had yarn sets done up for Casapinka's Breathe and Hope shawl, and there was this one, and I remember seeing it on Felicia's Taking Back Friday episode from a week or 2 ago. This is also Tough Love sock. This is Dried Lavender, and this is Slumber Party. And then I noticed too, once I started looking, and you can see Slumber Party is another one of those similar to the rainbow sprinkles that just is a neutral background and has little splashes of color throughout. And then I noticed it also has these little blips of pink. So I thought that I could possibly at some point use these 3 together for a shawl or something, because I think they go really well. So that was because, of course, you can't just order 1 skein of yarn. It's not worth the shipping. So I did add this set into my order. So these were the 3 things I purchased from Sweet Georgia. So while I was contemplating combinations for this shawl, I also came across these 2 skeins of yarn from Fiddly Dye Works. And I had bought these on a trip last fall that I took with my mom. And at the time, I was thinking in line of doing a fade, like a faded sweater or something. But I couldn't find 3 colors to make that work. But I did love these and I picked them up. This one's called Karis. This one is Gretchen. Now, I had recently been on the Valley Yarns website. That is a yarn shop that's, a good hour's drive from where I live. And I noticed that she was now carrying this Fiddly Dye Works yarn. And originally I noticed she had a, that there was a kind of solid or semi-solid in an olivey green, and initially I thought, maybe I would get that and somehow work the 3 of those up together. But then I noticed she also had this color called Adira. Now, I can tell you right now that what you're seeing on the screen is not how it looks in real life. It is pinker than my sweater, nowhere near as red as it looks here. It's more of a purpley color than pink or red. And you'll just have to take me at my word when I say that it complements these 2 skeins really, really well. Because they sort of have those pops of the shade in there. Even though it doesn't look like it. Sadly, I don't even know if this helps. Sometimes that helps. I'm not sure. Maybe that's a better look at it. Hard to tell till I get it up on the screen. So this is a definite possibility for another 3-color shawl. Maybe even this mystery one. I will see what the clue is, get a sense of what shape it is, and decide which of the yarn sets is most suitable for it. This obviously is not based on any sort of painting or anything, but I can't wait to combine them in a project. I just think it will be gorgeous. I've been itching to knit with this yarn. I think it's so pretty. And the reason I had actually been on the Valley Yarns website in the first place is that not sure, I can't remember if it was before Christmas or after Christmas or what, but I had knit a pair of socks for my husband out of Cascade Heritage Wave sock yarn. And he loves those socks. He says they're the warmest socks he has. They're very soft. They fit him really well. And I knew that Valley Yarns had a number of different colors in that yarn. And so I chose 3 kind of boring men colors because that's what he likes to wear, and ordered those. So this is color 501 Plume. These are just color changing yarns, kind of in blocks of color. They don't repeat themselves or anything. This is Graphite color 515. And then this is called Blues, color 511. So these will become socks for Cameron. And I had my eye on color 507, Lava. And I'd originally thought that I would get 3 skeins and do a fingering weight sweater out of it. And then my bill was adding up, and I thought, you know what, just get a skein for socks, and then if you really like it, you can get 3 more later for a sweater. And I'm glad I waited, because the more I see it, as soon as I saw it, it wasn't quite how it looked on the website, and it wasn't quite how I'd imagined it. So even though it's red, and I love red, and it actually would be a good color for me, I'm not sure now that I would actually knit a sweater from it. So it's just as well I ordered one. But, wait, there's more. So in the comments on YouTube this past week, a viewer had told me that she was working on the lounging top by Pohi Locatelli. And this is a pattern that she paired, whoops, I guess there's instructions there. She had paired up with Madeline Tosh with this project, and I believe it's some sort of fundraiser. So Valley Yarns doesn't carry Madeline Tosh anymore, but they did have fleece artist Merino Slim, which is very similar. And I found this coral colorway that I really liked. And I forgot, I'm going to go grab something. I'll be right back. Part of the reason, or the main reason I chose that color is I bought these jeans earlier this year. They have this great embroidery on the fronts of them, just above the hem. These are not quite ankle length jeans. And at the time I bought a t-shirt that was kind of in this same color and a white t-shirt to go with them. But I thought, if it's the time of year when it's not warm enough for capris yet, but too warm for full-length jeans and warmer sweaters or warmer tops, I thought a lightweight wool, sleeveless top might fit the bill, and then it would go well with that. Again, the color is kind of getting blown out, but it is a nice bright corally orange color, and I've definitely become fond of orange in the last few years, depending on the shade. So this is called coral. I don't know if I said that. So I went, months without buying yarn. And then all in one day, all of this lands on my doorstep. So isn't that a wonderful sight? And it just feels so good. So yeah, I got mail. I sure did. It was very exciting. It's been so long, and there's just so much promise, wound up in each of these skeins. So I'm very excited to start putting them into use. All right, that's it for the crafting and all the yarny goodness. Time to move on to some other things. So I've continued to watch the unfolding events in the United States with great interest. There seems to be a real momentum building, and is encouraging to already see some changes enacted. And I know they're baby steps, and I know they're long overdue, and I know there's a long ways to go, but it does give me a great sense of optimism that maybe, just maybe, we're on the verge of something big here. I think part of it is seeing such diverse crowds coming together and marching with a single purpose, and to see that the message is so widespread that it's being echoed in many other countries. Even here in my little city, we had a Black Lives Matter march last week. I didn't learn about it until it was over, but my daughter and grandchildren took part in it. And that's the other thing that is so encouraging, is that young people are getting involved, because they're our future. And in fact, the march that was held here was organized by a high school student who had experienced racism in her life. And so I just have this, just a sense of optimism for the future, and I hope that it is not misplaced. On a lighter note, last Thursday was our older son's 33rd birthday, and so we had the family here for a barbecue to celebrate. So I'm still very concerned with social distancing, so we held it outdoors, had chairs kind of arranged in household groups, and tried to keep those as far apart from the other household groups as possible. took turns at the barbecue, etc. But we did have people actually in our house for the first time in several months, had using the kitchen, and we had one of the bathrooms set aside for guests, and then the kids were in the spare room playing with toys. So it felt a little strange. We, once everyone left, did a thorough wipe down of everything. We have recently, since that time in BC, learned of a 30-person family gathering that had been held both indoors and out, and 15 of the people at that gathering became ill with COVID-19. And so it is a reminder that it's still out there, even though our numbers here in British Columbia have been very low and steady. And so we did mostly had our own food, but we did share things like, ketchup and mustard, and had a communal salad and such, birthday cake. So it's definitely something to think about, and maybe we'll dial it back just a little bit and continue that if we're going to get together, do so with all of our own things and not share anything, just as a precaution. Having said that, the province has relaxed its restrictions on restaurant seating. So it was at 50% capacity, and now you can submit a plan to the province to increase the amount of seating and for approval. So I don't think there's a hard and fast number on how much that number will go up, because you still have to have the social distancing protocols in place. But that is another good sign. What else? Oh, I was going to say I'm really hopeful. They've been hinting at the idea that if our COVID-19 case numbers remain low and steady, that they will consider lifting the non-essential travel ban. They were discussing that taking place around mid-June. Of course, we're pretty well in mid-June now. So Cameron has booked holidays, not next week, but the week after. And we're both really hoping that that travel ban has been lifted by then, so that we can go up to the cabin and spend a few days there. So cross fingers and toes that happens. As I mentioned, I did go a little further afield from home this week. Last weekend, Cameron and I took a drive into our neighboring city. His office is actually there, so he travels that way all the time, but I have not been more than a few miles from home in about 3+ months. So we were on the search for a new fountain for the garden. I had been given one for Mother's Day a few years back, and it was fine to start with, and then it developed some leaks, and then we thought we had fixed it, and then it started leaking again. We were finally able to exchange it, and it worked fine for a while, and then it's ended up having the same problems. So we decided to, just let's cut our losses and let's invest in a new one of a different style. So after looking at a couple of different hardware stores, we found one that we liked and brought it home. We also stopped at the wine store and stocked up on our Appy Night wines. For those who don't know, we have what we call Appy Night every Friday night, where we have a commercial bottle of wine and appetizers for dinner. Normally we just drink wine that we get made at a place and bottle ourselves. So our stock was getting very low, and so now we are good for a few months. I've done very little shopping beyond grocery shopping, so it's a little bit cautious about it, but definitely these stores had things set up well for social distancing, and other than one couple not standing where they were supposed to in the cash line and being a little closer than I was comfortable with, people generally kept their distance, and I didn't feel unsafe at all. And at the wine store, they didn't have any tastings going on, which they normally would. So I wasn't too surprised about that. And it was practically empty, other than staff. So we had lots of room to, spread out, be on our own. So, and then the following day, I went to a shop closer to home and picked up some lights for the garden. Last year we got these like little stakes you put in a pot or in the garden, and they have a little clear shape on the end. Like we had hummingbird and dragonflies, bees and butterflies, and so they have a solar sensor, so when it gets dark the lights come on and they change color, and they're just kind of kitschy, but they're fun. So all but one didn't survive over the winter, and we did replace the batteries in some of them, but they wouldn't work. And honestly, they're so cheap it's almost not worth replacing the batteries. Anyway, I stocked up on some new ones, and so I'm delighted to look out and to see all these little lights changing color at night. It looks like a little fairyland out there. My bread maker died last weekend. I was so sad. I've had this bread maker for probably, I'm going to guess 20 years. Everything around here seems to be at least 20 years old. And I didn't even pay cash for it. I got it through some member points at the grocery store. So it doesn't owe me a thing, but I was really sad to see it finally give up the ghost. I mostly use it for making pizza dough, but I do bake the occasional loaf of bread, especially at Christmas time. There's a fruit bread that I like to mix up the night before and have it ready for us in the morning. But when I started looking for a replacement, it occurred to me that along with bread and yeast, bread machines were probably one of those hot ticket items that people were snapping up at the beginning of the pandemic, when everyone was starting to self-isolate, because unless you want to spend hundreds of dollars, which I do not, they are nowhere to be found. So I'm going to have to make do with mixing it up manually in the meantime until I can find that they are coming back in stock, because I do really want to still have one on hand. Speaking of things dying, my cell phone is on its last legs, it looks like. I can't get the internet to connect. And so I phoned tech support, aka my son Matt, this morning to get his help with it. And so Cameron said, you should tell Matt, go buy a new cell phone so I can have his old one, because the one I own now is a hand-me-down from him. So I did fit this into the conversation at some point, and he started to laugh and said, guess what I just did 2 days ago? So he in fact does have an old cell phone that he was planning to sell. So I am going to take him up on it and go over later today, and he'll help me get it all set up. So that's good. I think that is it for this week. Before I say goodbye, my something good for this week is Dr. Bonnie Henry. Now, most of you will have no idea who I'm talking about, but she is our province's chief health officer, and she has won the hearts of British Columbians, has become somewhat of a celebrity here in BC for the competent and calm way that she has led us through the COVID-19 crisis. She has an extremely calm voice. She tells it like it is, but in such a reassuring way. And her philosophy is that if you give people information and tell them why you want them to do what you want them to do, they'll do it. And so she has just been a leading light and has managed our province's COVID-19 response just impeccably. And so proud. She was, last Friday was featured in a New York Times article, and she is being lauded as someone who has expertly maneuvered through this pandemic. I'll leave a link to that article in the show notes. I was reading it out loud to Cameron last week, and my was tearing up and choking up because I just remember that feeling of hearing that we were going to have to self-isolate and that everything was changing so dramatically overnight. And this article talks about the weight of that decision on her, but her conviction that it was the right decision to make. And she just leads with such compassion and just a true hero in my book. So she has very sensible, some different things she said that have become, associated with her, like wash your hands like you've been chopping jalapenos and you need to put your contacts in. So there's a very graphic, no nonsense, easy to understand explanation of just how well you have to wash your hands. Or my favorite is talking about opening up and the future of the situation in BC. And she said, it's in our hands as long as we remember to wash them. And then her sort of trademark expression that she closes most of her press conferences with is to be kind, be calm, and be safe. And those are words that we have tried to live by, and they are certainly words that we can all take to heart at this time and do our best to live by. So on that note, take care. I wish you well in the week ahead. Stay well, stay safe, enjoy your crafting, and I hope to be back with you again next week. Tuesday, Wednesday, probably not. It'll probably be towards the end of the week again, because I do not expect to record the following week when Cameron will be on holidays. But I'll try and get one more episode in before that happens. So thank you for watching as always, and take care till next time. Bye for now.